Hey, Kevin, it's great to chat with you today. Glad to have you back on the Attraction Pros COVID-19 video series. I guess this reboot's been about a year since we've kind of covered this topic in full as far as a specific designated video, but we know that you have been fully on top of this the entire time. So first off, just tell us how you are. How have you been?
Well, gentlemen, thank you. It's great to see you. Sadly, not in person, but hopefully very soon we'll be able to do that. Things have been manic here. It has been a cornucopia of everything, new projects, new clients, some new opportunities on the horizon regarding my writing stuff, changes, and also just generally trying to keep on top of things, as you kindly say. I'm trying to keep my finger on the pulse. I just hope it isn't a zombie is the issue really with me. But things are going well and there is a lot of positivity about, so it is a pleasure to be here again.
Kevin, it is great to see you. And, one of the things that we talked about last time we were together, and certainly a lot of the COVID conversations were about this pent-up demand that we felt like we were going to see. And I'm wondering if you can kind of give your perspective on what you've seen as places have started to reopen, people have come out. Kind of what are you seeing and what are you kind of inferring from what you're seeing?
Oh, well, I have to apologize to all of your listeners. My claims that there was a pent-up interest in the industry was greatly underestimated. It has been phenomenal. And I feel for all of those facilities that are still either going into a new lockdown or preparing to come out from a lockdown. Canada, our friends in Canada, I think, are very heavily who are only just now getting some idea of when they can come out again. But those facilities that open had a big problem on their hands: not enough staff and too many guests. And that's an interesting mix. And even with the new variants that has treated us like a punch bag over the last couple of weeks and months, we are seeing a major change in the audience's interest. Social entertainment, value time close to home is a new factor which all of the investors are looking at. And I can speak from experience. Back in August, I started to get attacked by investment companies that were sort of saying, right, we want to talk about the 2022-2023 building plans. And I'm going, what? And they go, no, we are following the argument that you're talking about of after the Spanish flu epidemic, what happened, the roaring 20s argument. We can see that's going to happen. And those companies that have been smart have been investing for the explosion that we're experiencing.
Mm. Now, one of the things that we also talked about last year, I think in April in the heart of the lockdown, is that while there was this optimism for this pent-up demand, that we were also worried that the amount of in-home entertainment options were greatly accelerating and might eat into some of that demand. Are you seeing that people are now craving to be together and be in person once again, even though our channels for communication are substantially easier and our opportunities to be able to stay at home on Saturday night aren't nearly as boring as they used to be?
Disposable income, isn't it, really? The ability for the individual who has access to a certain amount of capital to spend that on leisure entertainment, be that a restaurant, be that the cinema, be that an entertainment facility, be that just driving in their car. So the argument has been, with the cinemas going through the ructions that they've been going through and the restaurant industry going through the ructions that they've been going through, we were going to be squeezed in the middle. The entertainment wouldn't be important. Well, entertainment is important. But also we've seen some interesting things regarding your point about the home entertainment. Hey, this is the first time that the audiences have been exposed to streaming video of such high quality and in such large quantity. We have a profusion of streaming services, and we've seen something very, very interesting. Streaming overdose. Individuals have eaten their fill of some of the streaming products available, and we're seeing a downturn of those streaming services that supply us numbers, but there are ways to calculate. And we're seeing a drop in that. But we're also seeing an increase in gaming. Consumer gaming is doing well. Esports, from a consumer point of view, as well as an out-of-home point of view, is doing phenomenally well. We've also seen an interesting thing in the restaurant industry. Doom and gloom, it's never going to survive. We've seen some restaurant companies making vast amounts of money running dark kitchens, i.e. a kitchen that is only supplying food for pickup, which is an interesting derivation of how our world is changing. And also there's the other thing, which some companies have been talking about, which is the 3-day and the 4-day week possibilities for the future. And we're actually seeing people talking about what happens to that spare day. Will we see companies getting together from a home working environment and then wanting to share social entertainment space? And if you've been following the market, you'll seen some of the money that's gone into social entertainment companies such as Putt Shack and Illuminatum and Swingers. And you will suddenly say that there may be a fourth finger to the hand that is out-of-home entertainment.
Kevin, a minute ago, you talked a little bit about, the fact that we didn't have enough staff and we have too many guests. That to me is one of the biggest stories in terms of flipping the switch to come back, but the staff didn't. So there's all kinds of different theories out there, whether you're in the States or in the UK or wherever. I would just like to get your take, because we haven't talked about this. What do you think it is that kept people away? And what do you think it's going to take to bring people back?
Do you mean people, staff, or people, audience?
Staff.
Staff. We're going to have to face an important point here, ladies and gentlemen, that we have undervalued what we offer our audience. We have never correctly priced what leisure entertainment and what value that we offer our audience. We have, in many cases, followed a 1980s and possibly even 1990s pricing model of what's the worth of leisure entertainment and the product experience, the facility that you offer. We are now going to learn a very hard lesson that we have undervalued, and so we're going to have to put our prices up. We're going to have to put our prices up. We're going to have to improve our act, and improving our act means we have to pay our staff what they are worth. So we need to know what our staff is, what they do in the facility. We have to make their jobs easier through using latest technology and latest approaches to business. We have to offer them a safe place to learn, train, and grow, because these are people that we shouldn't treat as Kleenexes. These are people that should be growing with our company. And finally, we need some accreditation. We need now to be able to hire people that have proven their worth to the industry and are paid appropriately for their work to the industry. And I would like to champion what our friends at Traintainment have been doing in creating a portal for entertainment facilities to show that they have vacancies out there. It's something that our trade associations really need to get behind and support, because the lifeblood of our industry, as my father always used to beat into me, is the number of new faces that you see on the show floor and you see working in the industry. And the more new faces means the more happier people to come and work here, and the more happier people that are prepared to work here are being paid appropriately.
Mm-hmm.
So everything you just said right there, 100% completely agree. I definitely think that that is, an amazing long-term solution. I also think that, for the three of us as consultants, that it's relatively easy for us to say, raise your prices, increase your wages, and, and it'll all be great. But if we were then now to look at the reality of that circumstance, increasing your prices means more price sensitivity and backlash. Increase your wages obviously cuts into the profit margins. So none of this is really an overnight switch. For some organizations, they seem to have, I would say, accelerated maybe at a faster pace than the industry. But how do we get to where we need to be while also taking the appropriate amount of steps along the way so that there's not such a massive disruption, both from the profitability side of the business and the industry, as well as the guest frustration that, you're now charging so much more than you were pre-pandemic?
I the old joke is when I'm speaking to clients and I tell them, I think you need to correctly price, you need to put your prices up, and they go, oh, well, we'll start a cost-cutting exercise right now. We don't need a consultant. Goodbye, Mr. Williams. So you have to be careful about how you're going to feed this bitter pill. I argue a simple point, which is if you're running a facility and you're thinking of putting your prices up and you say, oh, we can't put our prices up because our nearest competitor will be cheaper than us, I think you need to look more closely at what you're offering and how you're selling what you're offering rather than how you'll be perceived with your competitor. It's the old Coca-Cola Pepsi argument. They had this weird perception that they didn't really understand what their product was. And so when they came out with Pepsi One, they suddenly found out that maybe the product that they were trying to sell was not really the product that people perceived that they were offering or what the market wanted. And we have to be exactly the same. If you can get a facility, an entertainment facility operator that isn't a major chain, but an independent, a mum and pup, to explain to you succinctly what they are offering to the market, you're speaking to someone who has done their research and is very up with how to handle themselves. Sadly, a lot of the indies that I deal with find it very difficult to express that they're in the social, interactive entertainment business.
Kevin, that brings up a point that I just recently had with somebody who's in one of my coaching groups, talking about the ROI of training, right? Because something you just mentioned a minute ago about the value of the experience that people are having. When people go to Kings Island or Cedar Point and we're priced at a certain point, we might say that's what we're perceiving the value to be. But if now we're raising the wages, then the experience may go up and the value of what they're paying would go up. But then we also talk about, having the conversation with the folks in finance and saying, hey, we need to train these folks for 5 days in order for them to be ready to provide that level of service. Well, finance says you can only have them for 3, right? Because we have to make this certain. So there's a question in there somewhere about what, maybe it's a chicken and the egg question, right? Which comes first? Do we look at the baseline of what it costs to bring people on board and say, this is what we have to pay to make people ready to provide that level of service, and then build the price on top of that? I'm not a financial guy. I'm not a marketing guy. So I might be looking for some guidance from you on that.
Well, I'm a business guy, and even though I've worked at both ends, both the sharp end and the blunt end of a facility operation, I also come with an ex-Disney hat on. So I'm all about the show, all about the pizzazz, all about the branding, all about the experience. I want our people to have a great experience when they come to facilities that we support. I would argue, number one, if you're having this discussion with yourself, fictional operator, you've waited way too long. As the old joke goes here in England, a disaster is a good time to bury bad news. And, if you hadn't already started the restructuring of your pricing model, so when you reopened, when you included the online registration, when you reinvigorated your web page, you should have had the new pricing in place, and you should have also been focusing on that. But all right, so spilt milk. Sadly, you had family and friends to worry about during lockdown, and you're only able now to come to the situation of reopening. And the fundamentals are what you're offering, who your competition is, what your catchment is, the people that you're trying to bring in, and what your brand, your USP, your uniqueness is compared. Understanding your competition is not the same as understanding your USP. You shouldn't have one against the other. You need to, I would argue you need to do this professionally, and you need a consultant. But if you're going to do this yourself, good luck.
Yeah. Going back to the staff wages thing, if we look at, this certainly isn't a new conversation. It's been a conversation of, and not just in our industry, but any industry that pays frontline employees minimum wage or even just above minimum wage, regardless of geographic region. The argument against what we're talking about here, as far as increasing prices and increasing wages, is that the individuals that are being hired into frontline positions, that these aren't intended to be career jobs. They're intended to be stepping stones, and the ability to learn the basics of working on a team, operating a cash register, integrity, ethics, things like that. Do you agree with that mindset, or do you think that we are getting to a point to say, a ride operator or an arcade cashier or a food and beverage concessionaire, that this should be an opportunity to actually build a career within that position, whether they're able to move up or not?
Welcome to an industry given the opportunity to grow, opportunity to find their own level. It's the rule of all employment. Thinking of people as minimum slave, disposable employees, hopefully is a mentality that can go to the, I'll be polite, to the distance. Anyone that still feels that that's a viable business model for them, that they're just treating individuals as minimum wage monkeys, then please could you delete my email from your account. We're here to grow, all of us. And if we're proud of the industry that we work in, we should be helping others to grow. I spent a lot of time mentoring individuals. I also spent a lot of time supplying news to individuals to hopefully help them grow. And I would hope that they're helping their employees grow. And I think any of us that look at the great amount of waivers, insurance forms, disclaimers that we have to have all of our staff under to protect our facility and to ensure that we're correctly insured. You don't want anyone that is a fly-by-night in your company because of the possibilities of litigation and also because of the possibilities of danger down the road. This is an industry. Sorry, if this was a skimming operation because your father was in it a couple of years ago and you know that you can get a holiday home out of it by rubbing your hand across the top of the bucket to skim, that's where the phrase comes from, then I'm sorry, fantastic, brilliant, just please do not stand next to me. But if this is an industry that is vibrant and growing, with growing individuals that will be proud to say when they're the managing directors or the CEOs of corporations in the future, I started at the bottom and I moved up, then that's the industry I'm joining.
Mm-hmm.
Well
and
said.
I think, yeah, definitely. I think a lot of us are, at least on this call, and hopefully the people listening are people that did start at the bottom and have found that it's an industry that we love, and we're going to do whatever it takes to move up and grow and develop and those kind of things. Kevin, I'd love to switch gears just for a little bit, because when we started really talking about reopening, one of the big things was around cleanliness. And you provided some great resources about, specifically arcades and game rooms and things that we could provide operators as guidance for keeping those clean and keeping those safe. If we could look back, hindsight being 2020, was that effective? Do you think that was the right way to go? Do you think that actually helped the industry and the guests coming back? I'm just curious on your take on kind of how that evolved.
I was always worried about when we created those operator guides, because it is kind of putting your neck on the chopping block. And when no one else was prepared to do that, none of the associations were prepared to do it at that point in time, I did really feel, and I thank you guys for circulating that and supporting that. I really do. And I had the pleasure a couple of months ago of actually walking into a facility and seeing what I'd always hoped for. Those rules that had been laminated and stuck on the wall of a facility in their toilets. No. It had been useful. But you're quite right, 2020, how many of those rules were really viable and how many of them were just common sense given the grandeur of being perceived as wisdom. I would say that it's quite a low batting average, to be honest. We didn't really need to go through some of the cleanliness rules once we learned exactly what variant A, variant B, and now variant D like. They don't like surfaces, so we didn't have to constantly try and wash down every surface every 10 seconds. We just now have to have a proper cleaning regime. The distancing and the avoidance of clustering is a thing, but now we live in a bubble environment. Sometimes clustering can be allowed, so that is a progression. Face masks, of course, is a hot topic, and I know certain states in America are now bringing back face masks after leaving them aside. I still stand by the staff wearing face masks regime, though we now have other variants of face masks. The clear shield systems is something that we're seeing deployed, and soon we're going to also see the new clear shield face masks being employed. So again, that's one thing. I feel that it's a hit and miss. Some stuff was common sense and pretty accurate. Other stuff was belt and braces and maybe a bit overkill. But I'm prepared to stand quite happily by what we did. The one thing that I think we're going to need to revisit is the how to deal with difficult questions. I was very lucky in having two very well placed consultants who gave me advice on, you know, the difficulty of questions, if it is a word. The why should I wear a mask in the documents that we created over a year ago was a lot lighter than really the approach that you need to employ now to keep your staff safe as well as yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Kevin, on the topic of masks, there was one thing I remember we talked about in one of our calls last year, early on in the pandemic, where we had talked about the possibility or feasibility of turning this into a retail opportunity. And if I recall correctly, you were against that back then. We've seen the industry do that to some extent. I've seen a lot of logoed, a lot of branded face masks. Do you still stand by that statement that this should not be commemorated and memorialized as a retail item, or have you changed on that a little bit?
The best thing I've seen is our friends at Faceplace. They did a device that could print your face on a mask, and I love that. That was great. That's humor. Mm-hmm. I love the wackiness of some of the stylistics. I am very against having my brand on a disposable health device, because next you'll be printing your brand on those paper toilet seat covers, and maybe
it's
that's
a slippery slope.
in more ways than one. Yes. The situation, hindsight is 2020, and some companies felt that they needed to embrace and to take the virus on the chin, and if that meant putting their brand name on their face mask, so you know that you're speaking to a member of staff rather than just someone wandering around that is wearing a name badge, I totally understand that. But my previous opinion still stands, I think.
Yeah. And I think some people approached it as a piece of the uniform. If they were going to require a team member to wear it, then they wanted that to be, you know, in costume with their uniform and things. So, you know, I can kind of see it
needs to be uniformly branded, yes, rather than entertainingly.
Yes, agreed. So, Kevin, I'm wondering if we can get in our little time machine and go ahead a year and kind of
grab the lottery numbers.
Think about where we're going to be, because I think a lot of us, even up until maybe a month and a half ago, thought that we were on the kind of the downslope, and we were ready to go, and things were opening up, and we were going to be able to travel even more than we already are. But obviously with the Delta variant and other things where people are bringing back masks and things. So I know that we don't have a crystal ball and we don't really have a time machine, but you are good at kind of seeing how things might play out. So I'm just curious about your vision for maybe what we need to do, or what you're seeing coming up in the next year, or maybe even a couple of months. That might be a fairer question.
So what my parents taught me was that a man that forgets his history is going to constantly curse to repeat it. And so a lot of my acclaimed future foresight isn't foresighted. It's trying to mix the information that is available from past and also try and apply it to the present. And a lot of people know that I've been using the 1918-20 Spanish flu pandemic as a kind of a model for us, but it is an imperfect model. They didn't have the same testing or the capability. We are so lucky to live in this time that we were able to break the back of a number of the variants through the fantastic efforts of our medical professionals and also the use of science through the vaccination process, which is still ongoing. Mm-hmm. What we have to face, a simple fact is that we were or should have all been expecting a number of waves of this. You know, when we saw the first wave go through, most of us were bracing ourselves for the second wave. The second wave came through, which they blamed on England and all of that. And then now we have the South African variant We've now got the Indian variant, which we don't call them by the country of who finds them now. It's not a game of findsies, keepsies anymore. It is now a variance game. So the Delta variant is an interesting one because it is still being beaten up by the vaccination, though we are going to have to look at a booster. And, you know, I do expect that we will get the 24 months of COVID. I don't believe that it was only going to be 15 months or 18 months, as some people were praying and hoping. I expected that we would learn to live with COVID the same way we deal with the common flu. The most important part is people may be telling me that the number of individuals getting it is going up, and I point to the number of people who are dying of it. And that is some really heartening numbers to see that our doctors have learned how to deal with it, and that the ability now of our industry, us as an entertainment industry, to deal with individuals, to manage them through our facilities and to still keep our guests safe and healthy, along with our staff, is taking hold. And I expect this time next year, if you have me back, though I will be in a bar rather than sitting at home when we do this, we'll be saying, yes, we've broken the back of it. Yes, there's still some issues, but at least the light at the end of the tunnel is an oncoming steam train. It is actually daylight.
Yeah. So Kevin, any final thoughts, words of wisdom, or next actions based off of that prediction right there, as far as what do we now do to roll with these waves and get to the other side?
Flexibility, resilience are the watchwords. We also have to be mindful. A lot of us have gone through some incredible stress, and we need to make time for ourselves to heal. We're not supermen and women, even though those wearing a cape in the hospital are. We have to be mindful that we need to protect ourselves mentally as well as physically. We need to take a close look at our businesses. We are in the entertainment industry, and people are coming out lockdown crazy, stir crazy, cabin fever crazy, and we need to be able to deal with them, but also to accommodate them and our guests and our staff properly. I would also argue that everybody watching this really does need to take another look at their business plans, all the stuff that they prepared themselves for coming out of COVID back maybe in January, February, and do the process again and employ the lessons that they learned. And I really would recommend that some people out there do a lot more research on what's happening in the industry. No one is an island. And some of the new developments that have been going on, I bumped this very small story. I bumped into a colleague of mine who runs an entertainment facility here in London, and he's had to embrace the one thing that he never wanted to do, which is cashless payment. Never wanted to do that. And I had to listen to half an hour of him telling me how good cashless payment is, him telling me I should be doing research into this. And before I strangled him, he brought the next round because he could see the color changing in my cheeks. Change is not always bad, but sometimes it's mandatory.
Yeah. And sometimes if we look at it as bad, it can hurt more than it needs to. I think that's probably
the danger is of becoming fixated with the problem. I feel your pain. If people are looking at this and throwing things at their laptop screen, and shouting at me from a distance saying it's easy for you to say things are successful for you. You've got staff, you've got opportunities, you've got jobs. We're still in lockdown. I feel your pain, but pain is not to be endured. Pain is to be managed. And if you need it, get help. And if there's anything that we as a consultancy can do, we don't put a dollar bill at all of the advice I give. I try and help where possible. But you also got to understand that I have to feed my family. But we're here to help. And that's another part of why we want an industry rather than a business. Because when things get bad, we all help each other, rather than when things get bad, we work out which member of staff we're going to lay off.
Yeah. Well, Kevin, that was a nice way to kind of end things, and kind of goes back to what we said for a year or so. We're all in this together, and I think we all are, as an industry, as individual businesses that come together. So Kevin, thank you very much for spending some time today with us, and for everybody out there watching, we are all attraction pros.